Lynn thought she found the perfect cheap place to stay, but room 9 was never meant to be lived in. Each tenant vanishes after one night. Now, Lynn is trapped in a decaying space that breathes, whispers, and watches. Will she escape or become part of the room itself? If you're drawn to chilling stories filled with psychological horror and supernatural dread, this is one you won't forget. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-tingling tales. And hit the bell so you never miss the next scream. The landlady's hand trembled slightly as she handed the key across the counter. It was brass, dulled by time, its ridged edge worn smooth, as though it had been gripped too tightly, too often. A faded tag dangled from the ring. Room 9. "Rent's cheap like you asked," she muttered, avoiding eye contact. "No deposit needed." Lynn raised an eyebrow. "That's generous." The woman's lips twitched, almost into a smile. Almost. Let's just say the room doesn't like to stay occupied. Lynn chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "What, is it haunted or something?" "No refund," the landlady said, and turned away without answering. Outside, the sun had already dipped below the rusted rooftops of the boarding house. The place reeked of mildew and old cigarette smoke. The stairwell creaked under her weight as she climbed, each step coughing a hollow groan through the still air. Room 9 sat at the far end of the hallway, where the light from the flickering ceiling bulb barely reached. As Lynn inserted the key, the metal clicked with unexpected softness, like a sigh. She pushed open the door. The room inside was modest. Bed, wardrobe, a small desk beneath a barred window that faced another crumbling building. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, and something black had crusted along the baseboards. A ceiling fan turned slowly above, each rotation scraping out a tired whine. But it was quiet, dead quiet. Not the peace of a calm neighborhood, but a stifling silence, thick and pressing, the kind that settles over a place when even time forgets to move. Lynn dropped her backpack on the floor and sat on the bed. The mattress wheezed, springs squealing beneath the weight. She lay back, staring at the ceiling. The fan's creaks ticked down like a broken clock, until it stopped. The blades froze mid-turn. She sat up. The silence now felt wrong. There was no wind, no street noise, not even the buzzing of insects outside. Just silence. And then, click, a soft sound, delicate, sharp, like a fingernail tapping glass. She turned toward the window. Nothing. Then again, click, click, click. Faster this time. She stepped closer. The window pane was clean, but something had fogged the bottom edge, like breath. Lynn reached out to wipe it. The fog vanished. A knock came, not from the door, but from the wall behind the bed. Tap, 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 tap. The rhythm was odd, hesitant, almost curious. She approached the wall, placed her ear against it. Silence. Then, whispering. So faint she almost missed it. Not words, not yet. Just the brushing of breath through a dry throat, like someone trying to remember how to speak. She stepped back. The landlady's voice echoed in her mind. The room doesn't like to stay occupied. Lynn shook her head, laughed nervously. This is stupid. I'm just tired. She dug her earbuds out of her bag and shoved them in, drowning the quiet with music. As she lay back down, she ignored the fan's stillness, the shadow gathering in the corner of the room where the light didn't quite reach. Sleep took her fast, but not deep. She dreamed of rust-colored water swirling in a sink, of a face in a mirror that wasn't hers, of fingernails scratching against glass, slow and deliberate. She woke to silence. Her earbuds were gone. She sat bolt upright. The room was dark, darker than before. And then she heard it, from the wardrobe, a creak. Just one, like a breath being held. Lynn reached for her phone. The screen lit up, but the time was wrong. It blinked 00:00 in red digits, frozen. The air in the room had gone cold. She rose, barefoot on the dusty floor, and moved toward the wardrobe. Each step felt heavier, as if the room pressed against her. She pulled. The door opened with a screech, and inside, nothing. Just her backpack. She let out a breath and turned. A face stared back at her. In the mirror on the desk, not hers, pale, hollow-eyed, blood-stained lips curled into something that wasn't a smile. She spun, heart slamming in her chest. Nothing behind her. When she looked back, the mirror was empty. The fan creaked back to life. The clock on her phone ticked forward. Lynn stood frozen, trying to understand if she'd imagined it, if she was dreaming. A knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps. She opened it. The hallway was empty, except... On the ground lay a single note, yellowed and curled at the corners. It had only 3 words, written in red. Don't trust mirrors. She backed into the room, locked the door, and leaned against it, breathing hard. From the mirror, a whisper, very faint, but this time it said her name, Lynn. And then the lights went out. Lynn didn't scream. She wanted to, but the sound stuck in her throat like a shard of glass, sharp and unmovable. She stood frozen in the dark, her back pressed to the door, heart thudding so loud she could hear it echo in her ears. The whisper had come from the mirror. Her name stretched into something unfamiliar, something that felt like a mouth learning how to shape sound for the first time. Lynn. Soft, but close, too close. The room stayed in complete darkness for a long moment. No power, no hum of electricity, just the stale smell of damp walls and the faint scent of something metallic, like rust or old blood. She fumbled for her phone again. The screen blinked to life. The time still read 00, unchanging. No signal, no Wi-Fi. The flashlight flickered on. And that's when she saw it. The mirror had fogged over, but only from the inside, as if someone were breathing on it. From the other side of the glass, Lynn's breath hitched. She pointed the flashlight directly at the mirror. The glass vibrated, just slightly, as if something inside it had shifted. Like the surface of water when something large swims beneath it. She took a step back, her heel brushing against the edge of the bed. Then came the tapping. Click, 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 click. Not from the mirror this time. From the ceiling. She tilted the light upward. The ceiling fan spun slowly, creaking with each rotation. But it wasn't the blades that made the sound. It was something above it, something crawling across the beams, moving in slow, deliberate motions, claws against wood. Scratch, click, scrape. She could hear it circling directly above her. Lynn forced herself to move, backing toward the window. She needed air, needed light. Anything to break the suffocating stillness. Her hands fumbled with the latch. She pushed. The window wouldn't open. It was sealed. Behind her, something thumped against the wall. Thud. Not loud, but heavy, like a body collapsing. She spun around, flashlight trembling in her grip. There was nothing there. But the wardrobe door, the one she had closed earlier, now stood open, wide open. She hadn't heard it creak this time, and inside something was missing. Her backpack. Gone. The room was shrinking, not physically, but the air felt tighter, thicker, as though invisible walls were closing in. Lynn pressed a palm to her chest, trying to slow her breath. She whispered, "This isn't real. This isn't real. I'm just tired." From beneath the bed, a sound. Breathe. Not a word. A breath. Human. Wet. She dropped to her knees, hesitated, then slowly lowered her head to peer underneath. Empty. Dust-covered floorboards, a dead roach, a silver hairpin, and then a pale hand reached from the darkness, fingers stretched toward her face. Fingernails cracked and blackened. She screamed. The room exploded in noise. The ceiling fan spun violently, blades groaning, scraping the ceiling. The wardrobe slammed shut with a bang that shook the floor. The light bulb above flashed on and off in rapid strobe-like bursts. The mirror cracked with a high-pitched ting, a single jagged line appearing across its surface like a vein splitting open. And through it all, laughter, faint, distant, and childlike. Then silence. Everything stopped. Lynn lay curled beside the bed, arms over her head. When she dared to look up, the mirror was intact again. The fan spun calmly. The wardrobe was shut. Her phone blinked back to life. The time now reading 3:11 a.m. She crawled toward the door. The knob turned in her hand. It opened. The hallway was exactly as it had been. Dim, flickering, lined with peeling paint. A single moth circled the dying bulb near the stairs. No footsteps, no voices, no sign of anything out of place. She stood there, trembling, waiting for something, anything, ... To tell her she wasn't going insane, a whisper floated from inside the room behind her. Stay. It was almost gentle. Lynn slammed the door and bolted down the hallway. Outside, the street was asleep. A lone dog barked somewhere in the distance, but there were no cars, no people. Just the yellow glow of a street lamp casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. She sat on the front step of the building, hugging her knees to her chest. What the hell was this place? She waited until the first light of dawn seeped over the rooftops before daring to go back inside. When she re-entered the room, it looked normal, clean. The backpack was back in the wardrobe. The mirror had no cracks. Even the fan spun with a soft hum, the kind that might lull someone to sleep. But Lynn knew better. As she approached the desk, she noticed something on the floor beneath the chair. A piece of paper, folded neatly. She picked it up and unfolded it slowly. More red ink. Or maybe not ink. Second night is worse. Her hand shook as she crushed the paper into her pocket. She didn't unpack. She didn't even sit. She grabbed her things, walked down to the landlady's door, and knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. The door creaked open with a soft groan. She peeked inside. The apartment was empty. Clean, but untouched. No signs of recent life. Lynn stepped back into the hall, and behind her, the sound of her own room door creaking open, all on its own. She didn't look back, not yet, because deep down she already knew. Room 9 wasn't just a place, it was watching her. And now it had learned her name. Lynn didn't sleep, not really. She spent the morning sitting on the concrete step outside the boarding house, watching the sun rise through the haze. Her skin felt clammy, her eyes raw from lack of rest. She had tried to call someone, anyone, but every number she dialed ended the same way. Dead silence, no ringing, no error message, just a flat void, as if her phone was reaching into a place that no longer existed. And yet, she could browse the internet, read the news, check messages. Everything worked, except for calls. As if whatever was inside Room 9 wanted her connected to the world, but only just enough to keep her from leaving it behind. She didn't even realize she had gone back upstairs until she was standing in front of the door again. Room 9. The brass number was crooked now, hanging by a single nail, the 9 tilted like a half-closed eye. The door was ajar, only slightly. She didn't remember leaving it open. The air inside was cool, still. Too still. The kind of stillness that waits. Lynn stepped in cautiously, phone flashlight ready. The bed was untouched. Her things were neatly folded on the chair. Nothing had been disturbed. Except the mirror. A crack had returned, longer this time, like a lightning bolt stretching from top to bottom. She stared into the glass. Her reflection stared back, but it didn't move when she did. It blinked half a second too late. Lynn turned away quickly, pretending she hadn't seen it. She sat on the edge of the bed, face in her hands, trying to gather her thoughts. And that's when the whispering began again. This time, it wasn't from the mirror. It came from the walls. Faint murmurs, layers of voices overlapping, some speaking in Vietnamese, others in languages she didn't recognize. Male, female, old, childlike, all whispering at once. Not loud, but inescapable. They see you. She never left. The room remembers. The whispers crawled along the plaster, sliding beneath the faded wallpaper. Lynn stood, pressing her ear to the wall. The voices grew louder, and then, clear, a woman's voice, pleading. "No, please don't close it again. I can't breathe. I can't." Cut off. Lynn jerked back, her heart hammering. The wall pulsed. It was subtle but real, as if the entire surface had exhaled. A loud knock shattered the air. Bang, bang, bang. She screamed, spinning toward the door. But the sound hadn't come from there. It had come from inside the wardrobe. She stared at the wooden doors. They shook again. Bang! This time the wood splintered slightly at the edge. Something inside wanted out, or something inside didn't want her to leave. Lynn backed away. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. The wardrobe fell silent, and then it opened, slowly, creaking inch by inch. Darkness inside, nothing else. She didn't approach. She couldn't. Instead, she turned and ran to the hallway. But when she opened the door, the hallway was gone. Only darkness stretched beyond. Pitch black. No flickering bulb, no railing, just a void. She took a step back, slamming the door shut. From behind her, the whispers returned. This time, they came from under the floorboards. Scratch, whisper, scratch. She dropped to her knees and pressed her palm to the wooden planks. They were warm, and something underneath was moving, crawling. She scrambled to her feet and ran to the window, still sealed. She banged on the glass, screaming, "Help me! Somebody!" But outside, the street was empty, frozen in a moment. A bird hung in the air mid-flight, wings stretched but unmoving. The world was no longer moving forward. She was trapped in a moment that never ended. Behind her, the mirror crackled. Not just the surface, the sound of cracking, like ice splitting on a frozen lake. She turned. Her reflection stood still and then smiled. Not her smile, a cruel, knowing curl of the lips. And the mouth moved, but no sound came out. Only the room spoke now. Voices from the bed frame, from the pipes, from the vent above the desk. Stay, stay, stay. Lynn screamed, flinging her phone at the mirror. The glass shattered into a spiderweb of fragments, and the moment she did, time snapped back. The hallway returned. Light buzzed overhead. The world outside the window resumed. The bird flew on. Lynn fell to her knees, shaking. She crawled toward the broken glass. Blood pooled at the base of the mirror where her phone had shattered. Her own blood. The screen had sliced her palm. She wrapped it in her shirt and forced herself upright. She had to leave, now. She didn't care about her things. She opened the door to the hallway and ran. Down the steps, out into the street, into daylight, into the noise of the world. She didn't look back, not once. Not even when she heard her name whispered softly behind her. "Lynn, come back." And then silence. Real silence. Not the kind that creeps, but the kind that lets you breathe again. The coffee shop on the corner reeked of burnt milk and desperation. Lynn sat at a table near the window, her hands wrapped tightly around a paper cup that had long gone cold. Outside, people walked past without looking in, without noticing her. She could have been a ghost. Maybe she already was. She hadn't spoken to anyone in hours. Her throat was raw from screaming. Her eyes burned from sleeplessness. The blood on her palm had dried, forming a dark line across her skin, like a warning etched into flesh. The mirror smile still haunted her. Every time she blinked, she saw it again. The curl of lips that weren't hers. The eyes that stared through her like glass. Her phone vibrated weakly on the table. For the first time since she'd entered room 9, there was signal. A single bar. She called her cousin Huang. It rang once, twice, then a click. A voice, but not Huang's. Just breathing, wet, shuddering, and then whispering. "Why did you leave?" Lynn dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a thud, skidding under the table. Her pulse spiked. She didn't pick it up. She left the coffee shop and walked aimlessly. Her feet carried her without thought, without destination, through alleys and narrow streets lined with rusted shutters and sagging balconies. The afternoon sun glared overhead, but it brought no warmth. By the time she stopped, she was standing in front of the boarding house again. Room 9 loomed behind those walls, waiting. She didn't remember turning around, didn't remember walking back, but she was here, and something inside was pulling. The front gate stood ajar. She stepped in, drawn by a force she didn't understand, legs moving as if under someone else's control. Her breath caught in her throat as she climbed the stairs, each step echoing louder than it should. The light above the hallway flickered once, then held steady. The door to room 9 was closed. This time, the number had fallen off completely. Just a faint rectangular shadow remained, surrounded by greasy fingerprints. She didn't want to go in, but she reached for the knob anyway. It turned under her fingers like it had been waiting. The room was colder than she remembered. The air stale, heavy with something foul. And then she saw it. On the wall above the bed, the stain. A dark, oozing smear that hadn't been there before. It stretched from ceiling to mattress. Wide and irregular, like something had been dragged down the surface. Lynn approached slowly. The smell was sickening. Mold, metal, something rotting beneath paint. She reached out, touched it. It was warm, alive. She yanked her hand back, heart racing. Then the whispering began again. Not from the walls this time, but from the stain itself. It pulsed. We remember. We remember you. She stumbled backward, her heel catching the edge of the desk chair. She fell, landing hard on her hip. The impact rattled the floor, and something moved beneath it. A deep groaning, like beams bending under pressure. The floorboards rippled. Beneath her, the stain began to spread. It crawled across the floor like ink spilled in water, moving fast, tendrils snaking toward her feet. Lynn scrambled up, leapt onto the bed, and watched in horror as the dark smear crept closer, coating the floor in a slick black film. It stopped at the base of the bed and held, quivering. Then it retreated, pulled back, crawling along the floor and up the wall again, back to its original place. Lynn stared. There were shapes inside it now. Outlines, faint, but human. A face pressed against the wall from within the stain, the features blurred and screaming in silence. Another face joined it, and another. Dozens, all distorted, all crying out in agony. She turned away, bile rising in her throat. The mirror on the desk cracked again. A small ping as a new fracture spread like a spiderweb. She stared at her reflection. Behind her, the stain still pulsed. But now, there was a message written on the mirror. Words that hadn't been there a moment ago. You brought it back. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The air in the room thickened. A sound rose from beneath the bed. Wet breathing, rhythmic, slow. She dropped to her knees and peered under again. This time, eyes stared back. Not human, too many, clustered, linking all at once. They didn't move. They just watched, waiting. She backed away, pressed her back to the door. It wouldn't open. The knob refused to turn. The air grew colder. From inside the wardrobe came a soft knock. Just one. She turned toward it, waited. Then it opened by itself, only a crack. Inside, her backpack again, sitting neatly. She didn't move, didn't speak. Something behind her whispered, "Say it." She shook her head. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Say it." "What?" she croaked. "Your name." "No!" The lights flickered. "Say your name." "No!" The ceiling groaned. The mirror cracked a third time. The wall behind her pulsed with heat, and all at once the whispering turned into a scream. A single, unified voice from every surface. "Say your name." Lynn opened her mouth, and darkness flooded in. Not just over her vision, but into her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything went cold. And then, silence. When she woke, she was lying on the bed. The room was empty. The stain was gone. The mirror intact. The floor dry. A dream? No, because in her hand was a scrap of paper, and on it, written in her own handwriting, "I belong to room 9. Lynn hadn't left the room. She couldn't remember when she last opened the door, couldn't remember the feel of the street beneath her feet or the sun on her face. All she knew now was the stale air of room 9, the way it pressed against her skin like damp cloth, the way the silence inside pulsed like a living thing. Her days had unraveled into a blur. She'd tried to mark the passage of time at first, scratching thin lines into the wallpaper by the desk with a rested bobby pin. 14 marks, or 15. Some had vanished, others bled. There were nights she forgot her own voice. Nights when she woke up in a different corner of the room than where she'd fallen asleep. Nights when she didn't sleep at all, just stared at the mirror and waited for it to blink first. But tonight was different. The air had shifted, thicker, heavier, and the curtain moved, just slightly. She hadn't noticed it before. The fabric hung over the barred window like a shroud, gray and stiff with dust. There had been no reason to touch it, but tonight it moved. A breeze? No, there was no wind in room 9. The fan had stopped working days ago, and the sealed window didn't budge, no matter how hard she pulled. She stared at the curtain, heart pounding. It swayed once, then stopped. Behind it, something watched. She didn't see it, not yet, but she felt it. The room had grown still, too still, like it was listening. She stood slowly, bare feet cold against the floor, and stepped toward the window. Each step a breathless count. 1, 2, 3. The curtain twitched again. She reached out and gripped the edge. The fabric was damp. She pulled. At first, nothing. Then the curtain tore away in one violent motion, collapsing onto the floor in a plume of dust. The window remained. The bars were still there. But now, behind the glass, eyes, 2 of them, pressed against the pane, wide and unblinking. Bloodshot, human and not. The skin around them stretched tight, gray and cracked like porcelain. They stared directly at her, unmoving. She screamed, stumbling backward, knocking over the desk chair. It hit the floor with a loud crack. When she looked again, the window was empty. No eyes, only her reflection. Except it wasn't her. The face in the glass looked like her, but the eyes were wrong. Wide, black-rimmed, filled with something ancient and wrong. The reflection smiled, slowly, and then vanished. A soft thump came from the wardrobe. Lynn froze. The thump came again. She approached it slowly, dread rolling over her like thick fog. She touched the handle. It was warm. She opened it. Inside, her backpack sat undisturbed. But something else was there now. A small velvet box, red. She didn't remember owning it. She reached out, hesitant fingers brushing against the soft fabric. The box was ice cold. She lifted it and opened the lid. Inside, a human eye, still moist, still twitching. It stared at her, pupil expanding slightly in the dim light. She dropped the box with a gasp. It hit the floor and disappeared, gone, like it had never been there. From the mirror came a low sound, laughter, but not joyous. Ragged, guttural, wet. She turned toward it. Words were written across the surface in condensation. "Do you see now?" "No," she whispered. "I don't want to." The laughter faded, replaced by tapping from the walls, from the ceiling, from beneath the floorboards. Every surface alive with sound. Tap, tap, tap. Then whispering, rising like smoke. She watched too. She looked behind the curtain. She tried to run. Lynn pressed her hands over her ears. "Stop it!" The room obeyed. Silence fell. But the silence was worse, because it wasn't empty. It was watching. The curtain, now crumpled on the floor, began to stir. Not from wind, from something inside it. A lump shifted beneath the folds of fabric. Lynn backed away slowly. The lump twitched and then dragged itself toward her. A wet dragging sound, slow and steady. She turned to run, but the door wouldn't open. The handle twisted in place, useless. She banged against it. Nothing. The lump reached her foot. She screamed, turned, and kicked it away. The fabric unfurled. Nothing inside. But the smell it left behind was thick and suffocating. Copper and decay. She stumbled to the bed, curling against the headboard. She didn't sleep, couldn't. She watched the window all night. The eyes never returned. But their absence was worse, because now they could be anywhere. And somewhere deep within the mirror, just beneath the silvered surface, something breathed. Lynn awoke to the sound of coins clinking. It was faint at first, as if someone were dropping old copper pieces onto glass. Then, louder, faster, a rain of metal cascading from nowhere. She bolted upright on the bed, breath sharp in her chest. The room was cloaked in darkness again, though she couldn't remember turning off the light. She fumbled for her phone. The screen refused to turn on, and still the sound continued. Clink, 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 clink. She turned toward the desk. That's where it was coming from. The drawer, the one she never used, was rattling. She stepped off the bed slowly, feet brushing the cool floor. The air smelled different tonight. Old, like rust and old sweat, and something deeper. A sweetness that didn't belong. She reached the desk and slowly pulled the drawer open. Inside were coins, hundreds of them, ancient, green with corrosion, their edges worn smooth. Vietnamese dong from generations ago, and others she didn't recognize, some still wet as if dredged from the bottom of a river, and buried beneath them, a piece of yellowed paper. Lin lifted it with trembling fingers. Written in jagged red ink, "Your debt is not in money." She dropped it. The coins began to move. They twisted, vibrating, spinning in place without being touched. Then they rose, one by one, floating, clinking against each other, spinning like they were caught in a vortex. Her breath hitched. The air grew thick. She backed away. The coins stopped, then dropped all at once with a deafening crash, spilling across the floor like bone fragments. Silence fell again. Lin stared at them. One coin had landed at her feet, upright on its edge. It spun and spun and spun, then toppled, and the whisper returned. "Payment accepted." "No," she said aloud, "I didn't give you anything." The mirror across the room vibrated. "You gave fear." Her reflection didn't move with her. It simply watched. And then something behind her reflection moved. A shadow, slender, bent at an impossible angle. It crept into the reflection, rising from behind the bed like smoke climbing a wall. She turned, heart in her throat. Nothing, only the bed. But her pillow was gone. In its place, a bundle of hair, long, matted, black, wet. She staggered back and nearly tripped over the coins. The curtain fluttered again, though the window remained sealed. Behind the bars, something pressed against the glass. Not eyes this time. A face, but upside down. Mouth stretched too wide, smiling. She screamed. The air snapped. All the coins on the floor began to rattle. Violently. Then the lights flickered. The room turned cold, freezing. Frost bloomed across the mirror's edges. From the vent above the desk, something began to drip. First water, then thicker, dark. It pattered onto the desk, slow and rhythmic. Drip, drip, drip. She grabbed her backpack. Enough! She was leaving, now, even if she had to jump out the window. She ran to the door, but as she reached for the handle, the room groaned. A deep, terrible sound, like the building itself had taken a breath. And then came the knocking. Not at the door, at every wall. The mirror cracked. The desk drawers slid open violently. The curtain ripped from its rod and coiled on the floor like a dead thing. She covered her ears, dropped to her knees, screaming for it to stop. It did. All at once, everything fell still. Then, soft footsteps outside her room, walking down the hallway. Slow, deliberate. They stopped at her door. A silence. Then a slip, like paper sliding beneath. Lin stared. Another note. She crawled to it and picked it up. 3 words. Check the closet. She didn't want to, but her body moved on its own. The wardrobe waited in the corner, quiet and patient. She reached for the handle and opened it. Inside was her reflection, but not in glass, in flesh. Another Lynn, wide-eyed, mouth sewn shut with black thread, standing in the dark, motionless, staring. And behind her, a dozen more, all her, all silent, all waiting. The one in front stepped forward, raised a hand, and placed a single corroded coin into Lynn's palm. The voice returned inside her head. Rent must be paid every night, and the door behind her slammed shut. Lynn stood frozen, the corroded coin burning cold in her palm. Her own face stared back at her from the dark depths of the wardrobe, lips stitched shut, eyes glistening with silent warning. The copy did not move again. It simply stared, as if waiting for Lynn to understand something she wasn't ready to see. She slammed the wardrobe shut. The moment it clicked into place, the air changed. Everything in the room tilted slightly, as though gravity had been nudged out of alignment. Her ears popped. The silence turned thick, humming just beneath perception, like a storm waiting behind a wall. She backed away from the wardrobe, her breath shallow. The coin in her hand was no longer cold. It pulsed with heat. Then she heard it. Click. Not from the door, not the mirror, but the closet. The small one near the bathroom. She had never opened it, had never really noticed it until now. A narrow rectangle tucked into the wall like an afterthought. Its handle rusted over. It had always been locked, until now. Click. The latch gave way. Something inside shifted. Lynn turned toward it, heart pounding in her ears. The closet door opened. Just an inch, and from that darkness, a scent. Rotting wood, wet fabric, and something sweet and putrid, like spoiled fruit. She stepped closer, drawn by equal parts terror and compulsion. She reached for the handle, touched it. The metal flaked under her fingers. She opened the door. Inside, there was no shelf, no cleaning supplies, no coats. Just stairs, narrow and spiraling downward into blackness that swallowed light. A whisper drifted up from the depths. "Come see." Lynn stared into the dark spiral. Her legs moved before her mind caught up. One step, then another. The stairs groaned under her weight, but they held. The air grew colder the deeper she went. Moist, claustrophobic. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. No signal. The flashlight flickered, then steadied. The stairs ended in a cramped hallway, barely wide enough for her to pass through without brushing the crumbling walls. Roots slithered from cracks in the stone, dripping black sap. She moved forward, guided only by instinct and the fading light of her phone. A low sound echoed through the corridor. Thk, thk, like fingernails dragged along concrete. She reached the end of the tunnel. Another door, wooden, blackened with age. No handle, just a keyhole. The coin, she held it up. On its surface was a symbol she hadn't noticed before. A circle carved into one side, a vertical slash bisecting it. She pressed the coin into the keyhole. It fit. Turned. The door opened. A room, far too large to exist beneath the boarding house. It stretched into a darkness her light couldn't penetrate. The ceiling disappeared into shadow. Walls lined with mirrors, but none reflected her. Instead, each mirror showed a different room. Room 9. Same furniture, same peeling wallpaper, but in each one, a different occupant. A woman curled on the bed, rocking back and forth. A man screaming at the mirror until blood streamed from his mouth. A child, sitting perfectly still, eyes gouged out. None of them. Then one of them did. A girl, wide-eyed, gaunt, her arms wrapped tight around her knees. She looked directly at Lin, mouth opened, and though no sound came from the mirror, Lin heard her clearly. Run! Every mirror shattered at once. The sound was deafening. A chorus of breaking glass, of screams trapped too long. Lin stumbled back. From the center of the room, something rose. A shape, not quite human, draped in tattered black, its limbs too long, fingers jointed backward. Crawling toward her without sound, its head tilted. A voice pressed into her mind. You opened the closet. Now you belong below. Lin turned and ran. Back through the corridor, back up the stairs, each step pounding under her like thunder. Behind her, the walls shook. Something was coming, something fast. She burst into room 9 and slammed the closet door shut. Locked it. The sound stopped. For a long time she stood there, chest heaving, eyes locked on the door she'd never noticed until tonight. The coin was gone, melted into her skin. A faint circle now marked her palm. She didn't sleep. She watched the closet. And it watched back. Lin hadn't spoken in 2 days. Her voice had become a forgotten thing, buried under the weight of silence that pressed against her ribs like concrete. She hadn't left the room since the night she opened the locked closet. Not even to try the hallway. Something told her if she opened that door now, she wouldn't find a hallway at all. Just more darkness. Just more stairs. The circle on her palm had darkened. It pulsed sometimes, a gentle throb beneath the skin. Like something beneath it was moving, breathing. She tried to scrub it away, even cut into it with the edge of her nail scissors, but the mark remained, smooth and perfect. Like it had always been there. It was the sound that woke her this time. Not whispering, not knocking, scratching. Low, deliberate, directly beneath her bed. Skrrk, skrrk, pause, scratch. She sat up slowly. The light bulb overhead buzzed, dim, flickering. The room smelled strange, less like mildew, more like earth, damp soil, old wood, like the ground had crept up through the floorboards to remind her it was still waiting. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed. The floor was cold. The scratching stopped. She waited. Silence. Then it came again, louder now, directly under her feet. Scrape! Scratch! Thump. It was trying to come through. She knelt beside the bed and pressed her ear to the floor. The wood was warm. She heard breathing, ragged, muffled, not human. And then something tapped the wood from below, like a finger. Just once. Tap. She backed away. The center plank of the floor shifted. It rose just slightly, as if something was pushing it from underneath. Then it settled. She crawled to it, heart hammering, and placed her hand against the wood, warm, throbbing, alive. She pulled her hand back and saw dirt beneath her fingernails. She hadn't touched any dirt. She hadn't left the room. She blinked. When she looked again, the mirror had fogged over. Words appeared on the glass. Do not dig. She stared. Another line appeared beneath the first. It remembers being buried. Lynn stepped away from the mirror, her chest tightening. From the wardrobe came a whisper, her own voice. Mẹ ơi, con không muốn ở đây nữa. Her mother's voice answered. But her mother had died 2 years ago. The voice came from the vent above the mirror. It's okay, sweetie. Just close your eyes. Come with me. I'm here now. Lynn shook her head, fingers in her ears. No, you're not real. You're not. Something clinked on the floor. A coin. Fresh, uncorroded. Still warm. Then another, and another. They began to pour slowly from beneath the bed, from between the floorboards, forming a slow circle around her feet. Rent, again, but this time she had nothing left to give. A crack sounded, not from the ceiling, from the floor. She watched as a splinter opened in the center plank. A black nail poked through. Then 2. Then a hand, thin, gray, covered in soil. Its fingernails cracked and bloody, each one clicking against the wood. It reached, grasping for her ankle. She screamed and scrambled onto the bed. The hand retreated slowly, sliding back under. But the floorboard didn't settle. It stayed loose, breathing. Lynn sat with her knees to her chest, staring at the plank. She didn't blink for hours. When morning came, there was no light, just a deeper gray. The sun had stopped trying. Another note had been left by her pillow. It was written in what looked like ash. If you leave, it follows. If you stay, it grows. Choose. She burned the note in the ashtray. It did not burn completely. The edges reformed, curling into the same shape again. She tried to scream. Only a rasp came out. From beneath the floor, the scratching began once more, and it whispered something new. Her name, over and over, but not in her voice. In the voice of every person who had ever lived in room 9, and not one of them was alive anymore. Lynn didn't sleep anymore, not because she refused, but because sleep refused her. Every time she closed her eyes, she found herself back in the same hallway. Endless, twisting, made of doors that bled. She would run, hands trailing along the peeling wallpaper, only to realize she was moving in circles. And room 9 was always there, waiting at the end of each turn. The walls had begun to change. What once resembled stained plaster now pulsed like living tissue, soft and damp to the touch. At night, they wept a black substance that smelled like burned hair and copper. It stained her clothes, her skin. No matter how much she scrubbed, it never washed off. Her fingernails were rimmed with it. Her teeth tasted of metal. The scratching beneath the floor had become constant, not always loud, but always present, like a memory she could never forget. Sometimes it grew bold, rising in tempo, shaking her bed frame until the springs whined. Other times, it would stop, just long enough for her to wonder if it was finally over. It never was. That night, the whispering took a different shape. Not pleading, not threatening, commanding. Get up. She sat upright. Stand. Her feet found the floor, cold and wet. Go to the door. She didn't want to, but her legs moved anyway. The door was closed, the brass knob dull and wore to the touch. For the first time in days, she turned it, and it opened without resistance. The hallway was gone. In its place was a tunnel, the same narrow corridor that led beneath the closet. She stepped into it. The walls narrowed with every step. The air thinned. The scratching sound was behind her now, but so close it could have been breathing down her neck. She walked until her shoulders scraped both sides of the passage, until the light of the room behind her vanished completely. Ahead, something glowed. Not light, a presence. She reached the end. A room, round and windowless. The walls here were mirrors again, but these reflected her now. Hundreds of versions, each with slight differences. One had no eyes, one wept blood, one mouthed words she couldn't hear. They were all Lynn, all watching her. And in the center of the room, a chair, facing away. She approached slowly. The air buzzed with invisible voices. When she reached the chair, she saw it was occupied by herself. Eyes closed, lips pale, a stitch running across her throat. She touched the copy's shoulder. Its eyes snapped open, black, empty, bottomless. It smiled, then whispered, "There's no door anymore." Lynn stepped back. The mirrors began to ripple. The reflections no longer mirrored her movements. They moved on their own. Hands pressed to glass, mouths opened wide. They began to scream. No sound, just the vibrations. Her ears rang. The mirrors cracked. The lights died. Then silence. When she woke, she was back in room 9, lying on the floor, alone. But the closet was open again, and the wardrobe door was ajar. The mirror was shattered, not cracked, broken. Pieces scattered across the floor like teeth. But most terrifying of all, the door to the hallway was gone. In its place, only wall. A smooth, seamless wall with no frame, no knob, no outline. She rushed to it, clawed at the plaster, screamed, cried. No response. No one heard her. Room 9 was no longer a room. It had become a body, and she was inside it. It began to dissolve, not suddenly, but in slow, imperceptible pieces. Lynn sat in the center of room 9, her knees pulled to her chest, watching the wallpaper peel itself from the walls. Threads of fabric slithered like dry skin, revealing what was underneath. Not plaster, not brick, but something pulsing, something alive. The floor no longer creaked beneath her feet. It breathed. With every inhale, dust lifted gently from the boards. With every exhale, the mirror fragments twitched like insects still dying. She had stopped crying days ago, or hours. Time didn't pass here. The light never changed. Her shadow never moved. The door had never returned, and the whispers had grown quiet, too quiet, as if the room was waiting for her to say something. But she had no voice left to give. The mark on her palm had spread. It was no longer just a circle. Now it curled up her wrist like ivy, branching over bone, etching itself into her veins. She could feel it pulsing when she pressed her hand to the wall. The room recognized it, responded to it, loved it. That was the worst part, the love. It wrapped itself around her like a wet blanket. It soothed her even as it devoured her. It knew her. It whispered her name, not as a threat, but as a promise. Lynn, Lynn, Lynn. She closed her eyes. Behind them, she saw her mother's face. Not as she had been, not before the illness, but now, staring from the mirror, staring from the wall, staring from under the bed, lips peeled back, whispering, "I never left you." Her voice had joined the others now, her reflection among the ones trapped in the mirrored hallway below. And Lynn was beginning to forget her own voice. But that morning, if it could be called that, something changed. A sound, a real sound. From beyond the wall, footsteps, steady, slow, measured. Lynn sat up, heart pounding so hard it echoed through her chest. She pressed her ear to the place where the door used to be. The footsteps stopped. Then a knock. 3 taps. Tap, tap, tap. Like the first night. Lynn didn't move. Another knock. Then silence. Then a whisper. A voice that was not her own, not the room's. A man's voice. "Hello? Anyone inside?" It cut through the air like lightning. Real. Alive. Human. She staggered to her feet and slammed her palm against the wall. "Here," she croaked. Her voice cracked. "I'm here." The wall remained cold, solid, unyielding. "No one's answered in years," the voice said, quieter now. "But the landlady says the room is still occupied." Lynn froze. The landlady. She remembered her now, faintly, blurred around the edges. Had she ever existed? "She told me to leave it alone," the man continued, as if speaking to himself. "Said it always rents itself." Rent. Lynn looked down. Her hands were no longer hands. They were paper. Thin, pale, inked with writing. Tiny symbols crawled along her skin, like scripture etched in blood. She stumbled back. The room moaned around her, low and deep, like something mourning its own hunger. And then the wall began to dissolve. Not collapse, dissolve, like mist burned away by sun. And beyond it she saw the hallway, real, clean, unmarked. A man stood outside, mid-30s, tired eyes, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He reached for the knob. He couldn't see her. She ran toward the doorway. "Don't!" she tried to say, but her voice was static. Her throat didn't move. The man opened the door, stepped inside, and the light went out. Instantly, the hallway vanished. The door sealed itself behind him. He blinked, confused, staring into the dim, stale room. Lynn stood in the corner, or a version of her, pale, hollow, watching. He didn't see her. He placed his bag on the bed, sat down. The mattress groaned beneath him. The fan above creaked once, and the mirror, cracked once again, whispered his name. Not Lynn, not anyone she knew, just the next one. The room had a new guest, and beneath the floorboards, the scratching started again.